Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Karl, who's the founder, CEO and director of Switch Metals, who are the largest shareholder of Coltan and Lithium licenses in Côte, with over 3,000 square kilometres of licenses, and with their flagship project being the ISSIA Coltan project. Karl is a natural resources entrepreneur and former investment banker with BMO Capital Markets in London, and he also founded Awale Resources and has now established another business called Switch Metals. In this episode, we're going to talk through his entrepreneurship journey. He's going to give us a background to Switch Metals and talk about obviously their projects and what they're looking to achieve. We're going to talk about Côte as a mining jurisdiction and also the tantalum market, plus a lot more. I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Hawcroft, who are leaders in risk management in the mining industry since 1992. They offer insurance risk surveys, construction risk reviews, and asset criticality assessments and more. They work across 600 sites globally, and support all areas of mining and resources. So if you're looking for any property and insurance risk management services, then please visit their website at www.hawcroft.com, and all the details are in the show notes. Karl, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Rob. I'm doing well. Thanks.
Good to hear.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. As I mentioned, obviously in the introduction, you're an entrepreneur and have started businesses in the past, and obviously your new company, Switch Metals. So I just wondered if you can give us an overview of your background and your history, so the audience knows a little bit about yourself, maybe from when you graduated to present day. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, I mean, in terms of personal background, I'm an Ivorian and French national, and I've been, I was born in Côte d'Ivoire and grew up here, and basically moved to France to finish my high school, and then moved straight into the UK to basically graduate as a chemical engineer as a start, and then I followed that up with, and that was at the University of Manchester, and then followed that up with a master's in metals and energy finance at Imperial College, which then pushed me into the finance side of the mining sector, and I worked in investment banking at BMO Capital Markets in London for a couple of years. Basically got promoted at BMO and decided to do something slightly different, still in the mining space but more entrepreneurial. So went back to my home country. Ivory Coast had just gone out of the political crisis, and was really pushing its mining sector. So I felt it was a real opportunity for me as an Ivorian to come back here. And since then, and that's 10 years away, I've been fully based in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire, and built my first venture called Awale Resources from this base, and more recently, Switch Metals. Awale is now listed on the TSX-V, and Switch just listed on the AIM segment of the London Stock Exchange, and that's really the latest story and the excitement that drives me every day.
Yeah. So I wondered if you can give us an overview of your new venture, Switch Metals.
Yes, Switch Metals is it's a tantalum focused company. We decided to focus on this unique commodity. Côte d'Ivoire always had some coltan. Effectively, tantalum is a metal that sits in a mineral called coltan. So sometimes there's a bit of a confusion there, but tantalum is the metal and that we get out and we sell as a product. And Cote d'Ivoire had that potential, but nobody really knows about it. And when I moved back here in 2014, it's something that at the time already attracted me. I was quite surprised to see that my country had this potential and that no one had done any real exploration on it. I mean, the country is very underexplored in general. Gold is the priority and has been for many years. And basically, I decided to build a company around this potential in the past few years, and this company is really going to focus on that, try to mine it, and get it into production as soon as possible. Of course, tantalum generally comes with other trace metals like lithium, niobium, rubidium, and others. So any trace and byproduct is a plus, but our focus is really tantalum, and that's the positioning that we've decided to have. It's a differentiating factor compared to other pegmatite / lithium and other rare metal stories. So we think we're really unique in that sense, and that's Switch Metals. As we kick, and the name is Switch Metals. It's not Switch Tantalum. So as we get the tantalum story up and running, of course we will always look at how we can grow the asset base from there. But the focus is now to get the tantalum up and running.
Yeah. And I guess some of our listeners, and including myself, may wonder what tantalum is and what it's used for. So I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about what tantalum is actually used for.
Of course, tantalum is a metal that we use daily. You will find that it has unique properties that help its applications. It's a tantalum that is very hard. It's resistant to heat, corrosion. It's also a metal that is conductive, and for those reasons, it's used in capacitors in the electronics industry particularly, but also in the cutting industry, in the alloy industry in general. It's also used in medical implants. The particularity of tantalum is that it's currently quite rare to find, but more importantly, it's geographically and geologically complex to find globally. I mean, some of the tantalum we consume today would be coming from byproducts of lithium mines, but 60% of it is currently coming from Coltan, and that's mostly from DRC and Rwanda. So the metal itself is very unique. It's used in alloys and in electronics. Just to give you an example, your mobile phone will have some. Your laptop will have some. You will find that in your television, in your radio, in your stereo, in your car. I mean, it's everywhere. But it's in very small quantities, but in many equipments that we use daily. And that's where the demand is really coming from. The electronics boom and anything digitalization would need more tantalum. So it's definitely a metal that is critical for us and the way we live today.
Yeah. Côte is often labelled as an attractive jurisdiction, but from a CEO's chair yourself, and obviously being a local as well, what would you say are some of the advantages and disadvantages with the country in terms of obviously mining?
Yeah, starting with the advantages. I mean, the country it's a country that has a lot in the African context. It's a country that has a lot of infrastructure. You would find that this country has energy, roads, a lot of water, and that helps, and that explains a lot why you have a lot of the mining companies, mostly in the gold space, including Barrick, Newmont, and others, Endeavour Mining, etc., who've established a base here and have a couple of mines in operations for some of them. The country is also quite stable in the West African context. We know what has happened in other neighboring countries, and democratically, the country has been quite stable for the past decades. So that is also a plus in the African context. I precise. Now, on top of that, it's a very underexplored country. there's a lot to find, and we're seeing that with gold, but we have nickel mines, we have manganese mines in operations. We expect to have a coltan mine in operation. So it's very a booming exploration play. This country hasn't unveiled all its potential, and there'll be more mining happening in Côte d'Ivoire. So it's a good to be in this country and to start mining businesses here. Now, in terms of disadvantages, well, it kind of comes with the advantages. I mean, the fact that it's so underexplored, that it doesn't have a long history of mining. As a reminder, the Ivorian economy has mostly been based on its agricultural potential. Out of colonization, the decision was made to focus the country's economy on agriculture. Côte d'Ivoire happened to be now the first cocoa producer in the world, first cashew producer in the world. So you have a lot of agricultural goods coming out of the country, and mining has been left out for many reasons, mostly strategic. And that creates the disadvantage because it's so new to mining that in terms of legislation, in terms of finding enough labor that is skilled to build mining operations, to grow mining businesses. Of course, we have to work a bit more to achieve that. And in terms of services, I mean, there are a lot of drilling companies present in country, but when you look at, say, labs and some of the service equipments, you'll see that in most cases, we still rely on people who provide services that have a base in Ghana, Mali, or Burkina, in the surrounding countries. So we're growing. There's still a long way to go, but the potential is here, and these things can be progressed very quickly. So, and we're already seeing a lot of changes. So that's some of the disadvantages, but they come with the positive side of things.
You've built one of the largest tantalum and lithium license portfolios in West Africa. Obviously, the lithium interest is relatively common today, but you seem particularly focused on tantalum more than, I suppose, anything else. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, Rob. I mean, well, as I said, when I first moved here, I was really curious when I saw the coltan potential in Côte d'Ivoire. It's not on the map of tantalum or coltan producers. There's no real artisanal mining like you would see elsewhere. So I was quite curious to find out more. And it hadn't been explored extensively. There was some historic data covering some of the licenses we then applied for, but there wasn't that much. And I found this metal, as I explained earlier, to be very interesting in terms of its uses. And things have changed since in the past 20, 30 years. So clearly there is more demand for it. After having spent a few years focused on a gold venture, I didn't want, of course, to repeat the same story, and decided, if I was going to pursue something different in the mining sector or start something from scratch, it had to be a bit different. And this time I really wanted to focus on something that was in industrial metal, something that could produce and sell to industrial players, and tantalum was ticking that box. So that was basically the personal drive behind it. And then there is the fact that the licenses that we've applied for and the nature has really given us the metal in very large quantities at surface. There's a lot of occurrences of coltan and tantalum on all our properties. So it was almost something that was imposed on us by nature. It's there. It seems real. The only thing I really wanted to confirm before getting involved into this and building a company around it was confirming that all the surface occurrences of coltan that we had on our properties were actually sourced from the primary rocks and primary source that we could find. So make the discoveries. So one thing is to have all this floating material at surface. The other is to make sure that you have the actual deposit that basically delivered that surface material. And that's something that we wanted to confirm before we could really give a big push to the story. And we've done that in the past few years privately. now to a point that we have comfort that first we can define a resource on the low-hanging fruit, which is at surface, and then migrate to the hard rock, which is the primary source. So effectively, have a long life asset was really what I wanted to confirm. For the rest, it's definitely a story that would differentiate us from pure lithium pegmatite explorers. And we are really happy to have this tantalum niche and provide that metal to investors as a listed company going forward.
Yeah. What edge do you believe that you have? I mean, I suppose competitive advantage. Do you think you have both technically and strategically to compete in this tantalum market?
Yes, we have, and I touched on this a bit earlier. I mean, we have this advantage of having both some material at surface. It's generally called placer deposits. They're effectively weathered rocks, which in our case are pegmatites, that would have yielded some free dig resources in the form of coltan nuggets at surface, and that's generally a low-hanging fruit, like I like to call it. It's something you can scratch from at the surface, very shallow. It's free dig. You basically just have to, basically it's shovel ready. You just have to excavate it, truck it to a wash plant, and then here you go. You have a concentrate. So we have that, and that's not so different, and that really created the advantage of DRC and Rwanda when they started this mining on the artisanal scale, and that's why you have so many artisanals mining in DRC and Rwanda. So we have that potential here, but it's untouched. We don't have artisanal mining in Côte d'Ivoire, and all this has been preserved over the years. So we can start from scratch and do it properly, and also benefit from the simplicity of that low-hanging fruit. Now, on top of it, we have the long life that I mentioned earlier, which is the source rock. The pegmatites are there. We've discovered them. They're mineralized, and we know that all the surface material has been coming from there. So the fact that we have both differentiates us from, and that we don't have any artisanal mining and we can start from scratch and do it properly, allows us to tick quite a few boxes, both in terms of traceability, in terms of margins that we could generate early, and also the long life that most buyers would want. They don't want to come and source for a few weeks or months in one place and then have to look for a different seller elsewhere. So surely if we want to attract them to Côte d'Ivoire's product, we need to show that we have a long life asset, and we have that as well. Finally, I mean, the timing. Timing is definitely something that is, I think we've timed it quite well. In this market where everything is becoming critical in terms of metals, and people are trying to source rare metal from different places, fighting for it. There's a lot of competition. The fact that we're in a country that is one that everyone is very comfortable to buy from and source agriculture or mining products from, it puts us in a very unique position. So technically, we tick a few boxes, and in terms of commercial and strategic positioning, we're also quite comfortable that we've made the right decisions up to now.
You seem to have a particular focus on delivering early cash flow, which I suppose isn't the typical route for a junior miner. Why are you making it such a priority, and how meaningful do you expect it to be for the company?
Having spent a lot of time and effort in exploring, as I said, my first company has been in the gold space, and I have followed in different junior exploration companies. And one thing that we know in these markets, and we've seen it in the last few years or decade, it's a tough ride. You need, and everyone is very happy when you can survive on your own. And when I decided to focus on something and start a new company from scratch, I felt that as a starting point, I wanted to do something where I could be and bring my shareholders and investors on the safe side as quickly as possible. and basically be able to guide the company without too much risk in the near term. And the cash flow foundation we decided to focus on is really about that. We, as a first objective, we want to put this company in a position where it has a good, strong cash flow foundation that keeps the company out of, I wouldn't say trouble, but that allows us to make the right decision to keep building the business. And the tantalum allows for that, and that's why we've also decided to focus on that commodity. We can be in a position where we have a good cash flow foundation, first to maintain operations, create a decent treasury, keep exploring to find bigger things, either within our portfolio or outside our portfolio, so we can grow organically once we have that cash flow foundation, and we can also be in a very good position to talk to other people about some other assets. So Switch Metals is a long game. It's one where you should see some fruitful results coming in the near term, but we have all the exploration and the upside that you would typically have in an explorer, and what people also seek. So we try to have basically a hybrid, and that's really how we differentiate ourselves as well in this market from a pure explorer relying constantly on equity financing. So that's the objective.
Yeah, you opted to start with a shallow coltan placer mining at Isra to generate early cash flow. Can you, I suppose, can you just start walking us through your overall plan and what the actual day-to-day is like for your teams on site and what your geological risks are by taking this kind of approach?
Yeah, the work we're going to start with is resource definition. Despite the fact that we have a shallow, free dig resource potential, we need to confirm that and estimate that. So we've decided to go full steam ahead on doing some systematic, and we're doing that with systematic pitting. We're not drilling it. The reason why we're doing systematic pitting is to have very good bulk sample. The free dig material has a bit of a nugget effect, so you want to minimize that by effectively having a sample that is representative enough, so that you can have a good estimation of your grade in one location. So we're doing that with systematic pitting, shallow pits, between 3 to 5 meters on average, which would then wash in a pilot wash plant that would allow us to standardize the washing process. That would give us an estimate of grade. We'll know the surface area, and the depth would be between 3 and 5 meters. That will give us the volume. So you could quickly figure out how we will estimate, in a very simple way using block models. We'll come up with a first resource by doing this systematic work. We have already started with a 200 by 200 meter grid spacing. We'll narrow that down to 100 by 100 meter and potentially down to 50 by 50 for our first resource. That's basically the colluvial part of the deposit that I call the low-hanging fruit. And on top of that, we will also have some alluvial material that comes from some of the basins that we've seen. All this material comes from the weathered cap of the pegmatites, and they sit at surface in the upper part of the deposits. So technically, that's what we'll be doing. And once we've got the resource, of course, we'll follow that with some metallurgical studies and a scoping study in the near term.
What would the flow sheet look like to generate first product, and how complex do you anticipate it to be, and how do you plan to migrate implementation and ramp up risks?
Tantalum production from the type of ore that we have is basically based on a flow sheet that is fairly simple, because it's gravity separation and particle size separation. There's no chemicals involved, and there's no very complex metallurgy. It's really a question of grinding it to the right size and separating it using the gravity, because tantalum is very heavy. So that's the principle. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. These processing plants and equipments exist in many places in the world. They're not that different to what you would see as as an alluvial gold plant, but in this case it's not gold, it's coltan. And then on top of that, the shallow portion of the deposit, because it's been weathered and because the coltan has already been freed up. So in this instance, nature has done some of the processing for you. We won't require to do too much grinding. So and that's where the economic advantage is in this shallow portion of the deposit that we're focusing on right now. It should minimize the amount of crushing and grinding we have to do. If we were to start immediately with the primary source, which is a hard rock source, we would have to grind it, and that's basically the additional cost that sometimes makes some of these projects more complicated to break even on. In places like Southern Africa, as an example, Namibia, a lot of the deposits don't have the advantage of having this free dig material at surface that's already weathered and freed up, and that basically makes it a bit more complex because they have to start straight with the hard rock and therefore pay for the energy that comes with that. We're going to start with something very basic. Gravity and particle size separation should give us the concentrate we need. In some instances, depending on the met test we do, we might need some magnetic separation in the back end to further purify the concentrate, but that would be dependent on the met tests we're going to do in the near term. And again, magnetic separation is not rocket science.
Yeah. How do you plan to fund this early cash flow development strategy? Obviously, in today's markets, where I suppose there is a lack of liquidity in the markets at the moment.
Yes, the fact that we have this project that is fairly simple and less risky than others and requires a relatively low capex, that we think would allow us to tap into two alternative sources of financing other than equity. One is offtake and strategic investments. We're already seeing quite a bit of interest from some buyers on the market. I mean, there are a few players in this market that are quite interested, especially in the current context, to source material from alternative countries than Eastern Africa. So that's one option that we have on the table. And because we are de-risking the project on the geological side, we think that we should be in a position to kick off some discussions with some bank funding providers. And that's something that we will also tap into. Both local banks, but regional banks as well in West Africa would look at this. But some project financing might be of interest, and some family offices who have a strategic interest in supporting and basically having some level of control on certain metals would also look at our assets. So we are in a very comfortable position in that sense, because we have a project that affords it. It is more complex for other commodities, but also other environments and projects. And the size of the project, we think, would allow for de-risking the funding aspects. It's not going to be the biggest capex project in the world, we think.
ESG pressures are growing, especially around ethical sourcing and obviously local impact. I also understand that your sites are relatively preserved from artisanal mining activity. How are you managing this at site level?
To start answering this question, I mean, the ESG is inherent to what we do. I mean, we effectively, when you focus on tantalum, you can't sell a product if you don't tick the ESG boxes. So in our case, we have no choice but to meet all these ESG criteria, because our end clients want us to demonstrate that we have traceability, that we're doing it in an ethical way, and that we're mining in an ethical way, that anything along the value chain is done perfectly, and that's really what the demand is today for tantalum. Now, how we apply that on site, I mean, as you said, we're starting with something that luckily has been preserved historically. And that preservation allows us to do everything from scratch and try to set the right principles. The first one is really communication. Having that experience in Côte d'Ivoire and the fact that mining is fairly new, even at the exploration stage, what we try to do is communicate a lot with the communities. So we organize meetings in the different villages with the communities just to explain what we're going to do and the steps. So at this stage, we explain that we're just exploring and this is the impact of exploration, which is quite minimal, etc. However, mining would look like this. And we also present them, what the mine is, what the compensations, if ever we build a mine, are going to be, what the communities are going to gain from it, and why we need their support to achieve that. Because mining, when it's done properly, brings positive impact where it happens. So because you do need to develop the surrounding areas and etc. etc. So and there's some good examples in Côte d'Ivoire already of the impact of mining and what it has brought to the local communities, and therefore it helps our pitch when we actually go and present the case to the local communities. And we have a lot of support from the local administration, which is quite well organized in Côte d'Ivoire, and the hierarchy is very well set. So everything and the regional direction of mines, etc., is supporting that. So we start there, and on top of that, we try to make sure that we limit or the potential of artisanal mining, because generally that's where the problems start. So on our properties, because the legislation is pretty clear, people understand that, well, when you have there's no overlap of mining licenses, exploration licenses with anything that would be considered authorized on the artisanal mining side. So it preserves, again, protects our licenses from this happening. And we will try to do things in a mechanized and industrial way going forward, which again would employ people and show them an alternative to illegal artisanal mining or artisanal mining in general. So that's that, and also provide traceability to our clients. So these are the steps we're trying to follow, starting with the communication, which I think is the most important part, and listening to both the administration but also the communities. On the environmental side, the fact that everything has been preserved help us again to make sure that first we focus on the right areas, but also have a plan to rehabilitate those areas if we do end up mining from there and sourcing any coltan from these properties.
And lastly, what is the short and medium term outlook for Switch Metals, and what do you sort of want to achieve?
The outlook, we're really now focused on delivering this resource. Everything starts with the resource, as we know in the mining space, and we want to start there. That's the focus. It's really something that will be done systematically with the pitting and washing that I said. It's quite unconventional in that sense, because you would generally see people talking about drilling. Again, in our case, we're not going to drill because it doesn't make any sense to drill. We need a bulk representative sample, and it's pretty shallow what we're trying to count here. So the resource is really the near-term outlook. On the back of that resource, we want to put some economic parameters. That's one thing I keep repeating, but because tantalum is quite niche in the market sense, and because not everyone would be able to value what we would have estimated. We want to quickly have some economic parameters that would demonstrate the value of what would have initially been measured. And of course, we're going to work in parallel to that on increasing the resource. I mean, the first resource is not going to be the final resource, but it's one that we think will be sufficient to justify progress and towards production. However, we will keep exploring. So in the near term, it's still going to be resource definition, scoping study, and increase in resource are the next 3 steps for us.
Carl, thank you thank you very much for your time. Obviously telling us all about Switch Metals, speaking about obviously tantalum as a commodity, and everything that's happening in Côte. So, wish you well for the remainder of the year and hope you get this project off the ground. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they have any questions, and want to follow the story, what social media platform channels are you on and how can people get in contact?
Yes, we're on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can search Switch Metals. You'll find us there. And we have a website as well, which is www.switchmetals.com. And you could also find us on the LSE website if you're looking at price charts, etc. But on other platforms that you would be trading on, you could also see the ticker. The ticker is SWT.
Great. We'll include those in the show notes accompanying this podcast episode for easy access to our listeners. Wish you all the well for the remainder of the year, and perhaps you want to come on the podcast next year to give us an update.
With great pleasure. Thanks, Rob, and surely I'll keep you up to date.
Yeah, no worries, and all the best. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Obviously, Cole was speaking about his company, Switch Metals, and speaking about commodity that we may have spoken about once before, tantalum, which is obviously used in every day of our lives, whether it's a phone, computer, television, etc. So it's important to spread the message among people within our mining community, but also people outside of mining. So thank you for listening, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.